Tabletop is brought to you by the following sponsor.
Are you looking for something comfortable to wear and keep your brain warm while playing tabletop games? Daily Dose of Yarn makes handmade, customized beanies for all of your style and comfort needs. She can even help you with a custom beanie to represent your favorite character. Check out Daily Dose of Yarn on Instagram and Etsy to order your new favorite beanie today.
Welcome back to Tabletop, everyone. Today we're talking about exploration in games. Now, I am so scared of this topic as I'm terrible at it. I just feel so nervous when I have to run a really open world. But my friend Daniel isn't, and he sits down with me to talk tips and tricks about how to add compelling exploration in your games. So I'll stop talking now, sit back and enjoy this awesome episode with Daniel. Welcome back, Daniel, to Tabletop Podcast, the podcast where I talk to you, my friend, about D&D.
Hey, thanks for having me back.
Oh, of course. I would always have you back, Daniel.
I'm nervous. It's my first time
That's not
solo.
True. Oh, no, that's also not true.
No, I've had at least someone next to me this whole time.
No, you haven't. Remember
Always.
Your first episode, making your own setting. Go listen to it if you haven't. It's a pretty good one.
Was I alone in the room for that?
You were alone in the room. Well, I was there. I mean, I'm here now, though. So.
All right, but you're the host.
You're not a person.
You're a celebrity.
That's very much not true. Daniel, what are we talking about today?
We're going to talk about being outside. Everyone's scariest fantasy, the outdoors.
All right, I'm going to just take what you said. I'm going to filter it through. Exploration. Oh, what a great topic, Daniel. I'm so glad we're going to talk about it. Exploration is specifically in TTRPGs, which is, I think, one of the hardest things you can do.
It is hard to pull off and difficult to both run and play in if you are unprepared for it.
Yeah, I have read and listened to a couple of theories around DMing, and there was somebody who came up with an idea that either you are a sandbox or a roller coaster. And a roller coaster, the bar comes down and it's a ride where it's sort of on a track and you tell a story, things get exciting, and then you have the end of the ride. Whereas a sandbox is you kind of get dropped in and then you just play. I have never been able to pull off a sandbox super well. Obviously all of these games are a bit of a sandbox in that if you listen to the improvising episode, people can do whatever the hell they want, and sometimes it goes off the rails. But I've always been able to sort of shepherd a group to keep a story interesting to them long enough that they want to continue it, and that usually drives them along a certain path. Not always, but sometimes. Whereas I feel like in a lot of games I've played with you, it's very much here is, especially lately in the Canaries game and some others, where it's just here's a map and what do you guys want to do? Which is, I've always found very hard to pull off. So I'm very excited to hear you tell me your secrets.
Okay, well, I'm not going to tell you all my secrets. Got to keep a couple of those in the back pocket. Yeah, so I guess an important thing to consider if you're going to be running a game and you want to use the exploration sort of as a wing to visit is that there's a lot of storytelling potential that you can do just in the wilds.
Okay. Why don't we just start there? What do you mean in that? Do you just mean that there's a lot of kind of stories to be had with in between locations of interest or civilization, and that out in the wilds that you can pull off a interesting full story on its own? Or?
Not even a full story. It's you got to think of it like a supplement to what you're actually telling. Here's one for the nerd audience. What does
Daniel? I think all of our audience.
Do you remember the very first episode of the Pokemon anime back in '98
with the Ho-Oh that flies off in the
Ho-Oh.
end? Yeah, Ho-Oh.
So that was just Ash, not part of the greater story of the episode. That was resolved. But then you see this big mystical legendary Pokemon just up in the air, minding its own business, and it's oh, there's there's bigger things in this world than what I'm dealing with now.
This lightning rat doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things.
This rat means nothing. I picked the wrong starter.
Yeah.
And also, this to consider, it's not a TTRPG itself, but there's a mod made from it. But the Fallout series, you played that?
Yeah.
They do really great work with environmental storytelling. Like an example, just wandering around the map in one of my recent playthroughs, you come across 2 small graves.
Right.
Child size, and there's 2 skeletons beside it. Mm-hmm. One of them has a gun in their hand.
Right.
That you can find and pick up. So that tells you kind of like, oh, this world, before you found it, has some dark moments.
Yeah.
Tells you that people are desperate. And that's not an ongoing adventure. That's not a campaign. That's just while you're out walking from one event to another, just a little something extra to kind of tell you what's going on.
The big thing that I have always come across when I try to have travel be part of my campaigns is that, how do I say it? It can feel sort of like a check in that you start traveling, like as a DM, maybe you're like, hey, it takes 24 hours to get from this city to this city. How do you go about it? And someone's like, okay, we rent a cart drawn by horses and we sit on the back of the cart. And you're like, do you take watches or are you all resting? And someone will be, okay, we take watches. And then it's like, okay, roll a perception check. And we'll do different perception checks on the way through, which is, I think, a pretty standard way to do travel and see like, hey, does an event happen? And then maybe you roll percentage dice. And that always seems like very kind of, I would say, is like the standard way that I've always experienced or ran travel encounters. But it always feels pretty, it doesn't feel story driven. Or it doesn't feel sort of dynamic. It feels kind of,
well, it feels like in that method, it's very like sort of just meticulous.
Yeah,
and kind of a bit of, it's too crunchy.
It feels math. Yeah, it feels like math.
Well, are you familiar with hex crawls as a concept?
Where it's just a hex grid kind of thing? Or?
Yeah.
I mean,
so
we
this
play
is
in one.
like the DM does a little bit of extra work, and I tried to do this, but I didn't really pull it off because the hex map was so big.
Yeah.
You as the DM can either like just decide, you guys just plot a course. Don't worry about perception checks or whatever. Just tell me like which hits you do.
Yeah.
From
like
point A to point
what
B.
hexes you hit on the
And
way
then
through.
you as the DM just be like, can tell them when an event happens or sort of like go into it.
So it's sort of that Pokemon moment of like doodle 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 doodle.
Well, they don't all have to be encounters like
Yeah.
that. Like, it'd just be like, oh, you meet 2 people on the side of the road. They don't have to be an obstacle or something to get by. You can just be meeting people in your world.
Yeah.
And just like, then you get like a grassroots feel for what people are going through, what they're talking about, what's important. Like, you can draw your players into the world on these long trips just by saying, hey, you meet these 2 people on their way to market, and they just tell you local gossip, and you can add some stuff in like that.
That's like a pretty interesting way to run a sandbox campaign too, because you could kind of run it almost like Betrayal, the board game. Have you ever played that? Where every time you draw a card to make the new room, there's like something that happens, and sometimes it's something meaningful and dangerous, and sometimes it's just like, hey, a spooky owl.
It can be helpful, an obstacle, or just sort of mundane nonsense. But it's all just things that can happen on a trip without making it like, oh, there's a combat encounter, or oh, there's a trap. Like, it doesn't have to be dangerous. It can just be like, oh, you find this rare 3-tailed fox that exists in this world, and then make a lore check. You know this about that, and now you're just pulling the players into this thing where you're like, okay, you're not in danger.
Yeah.
But let's just role play this moment of you finding this like wondrous thing while you're out and about on your journey.
Yeah, it almost kind of reminds me of, like you were saying, Fallout or Red Dead or something, where you can, especially if you were going into a game where you're saying, okay, I have built this sandbox for you to play in. I don't have a story. There are stories in this world, but you guys are driving it. Go. And then you have a bunch of little things that can happen throughout. And like you said, it would be a little extra work, but you could have it like, hey, you come across this, plotted the course through this grid, and at this hex, you have them kind of go into, zoom in and say, okay, you're like traveling, and this little kid runs out of the forest, and you see like chains on his feet, and he says, "Help me! You have to get me in the cart before they come and get me." And then it's like, oh, there's something in this forest. There's like an adventure to be had. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that could be a really fun way to do it, especially if you were going with like something a little bit smaller scale than the world is on the tip of a knife and there's some huge thing happening that you are trying to stop or you're trying to do. And instead you're just like an adventurer. You know what I mean? A little bit smaller scale, maybe even to start a campaign.
Well, that's kind of how, if you ever played the module, and we've talked about this before, the Curse of Strahd, the entire module is set up where you can just explore Barovia.
Yeah.
And the book doesn't give you like, oh, this happens here, here, here. It's like, these NPCs are about here, so if the party travels through this area, roll in an encounter. Like, there's lots of ways to do it where you're not, if you don't ever go to Hex A3, you'll never meet this person. But it's just like, you can make the world more interesting by letting your players walk through it without threatening them with combat every single, 6 miles that they're out there.
Yeah, totally.
You could also use the world map and the exploration to do a couple of other fun things. Some games do this, and it's kind of like Minecraft or Mass Effect, where maybe in order to get magic items or to build structures or their stronghold, they have to find
resources,
ore deposits, certain trees. And we're exploring the land not to look for a monster to find a dungeon, but we just gotta mark these things for the city so that we can build our renown a little bit and resource gather. And also, hey, it's a good way to make the players have money without killing for it all the time.
It's really funny that you say this in this way, because you and I recently started a work game where it was very small scale. There's 2 players and you GM, and you had kind of came up with this traveling story, a treasure hunt sort of thing. And to drive us towards that, you made it so that we had to pay kind of an impossibly high tax every so often. And so it kind of would push us to find these treasures, right?
Yeah.
And instead, my colleague and co-player and I decided, wouldn't it be cool to kind of run an honorable Yakuza style operation in this small area of the city and slowly build our resources and renown in here and slowly expand influence. And now it's become sort of, like you said, a Mass Effect or an Age of Empires kind of thing of slowly meeting and gaining connections with people, pushing our influence. We made a neighborhood watch to try to start gaining the public's trust while burning down our rivals bases of operations and things. And it's turned into a completely different game than you expected, but it's a lot of fun.
Exploration, but just in a city instead of a world map.
Yeah, totally. So I think that's interesting, that what you said about resources being a way to drive the desire to explore. The thing that I've always had trouble, because I'm such a story-based player. I'm all about mostly even character story when I'm playing. I want to find that my character is moving towards some goal or going through some personal change or whatever it is. How, as a GM, are you able to try to hook characters into the feeling of exploration can also lead to that stuff as well?
Well, that's kind of just I don't think it has to be one or the other. I think exploration could be something that happens in between those other stories.
Right.
Have the characters go through a long arc of developing and doing all that stuff, giving them RP experiences. It's always good around, the campfire at night. Just you're camping, and before you start taking watches, you have some time. Does anyone want to bring anything up or talk? Or
anyone want to start some shit?
Or do you want to start conflict? That could be happening in between the explorations, but maybe you just have an exploration episode where you handle some of that before you go back into the other stuff. They don't all. When you're playing, you have 2-3 hours when you're running a session. So I think it would be kind of hard to tie all the different columns of role playing into every single session.
Yeah.
but focusing on character development one night and exploring around, in another session. And that also helps with the game's longevity. If you're not always doing one thing and you're branching out, then the campaign can last longer.
Yeah.
Because you have more stuff to do and it's varied, so no one gets bored and everyone's just like, okay, we're invested. We have a lot of different things we can try.
A lot of hands in different pots.
Yeah.
Like, I think that the most successful I've found this, and I mean, the games that I run are the games that I am in as a character are usually run this way, which feels nice. But exploration is part of the game, but usually the setting is well enough developed where, like, maybe there's a war going on between two factions or two kingdoms or whatever it is, or maybe some sort of magical event is happening. And so on this large scale, you have sort of drivers to kind of hook people to go manage a bigger story. But then on a small scale, you have these little moments, like you said, of like, hey, like in your game, there was the cult of Thor, which is because a god was kind of migrating from one realm to another one and was setting up shop in Cornor. And this kind of cult was trying to become a real religion because of that. And we started running into them. And like, as we explored, we kind of would bump into them once in a while. And exploration in certain areas drove like one of our characters to be like, oh, I kind of want to go and do some of these kind of like quests based on that. And so it was a way to have people find hooks that were interesting to them to drive them towards non-main quest.
Yeah,
stuff.
like it's
yeah.
You can put main quests in like the big cities or the dungeons. But there should be lots of little side quests or small adventures that could be found just by going off the beaten path a little bit, which is, what an adventuring party does.
Yeah. It's, they all about kind of roughing it.
Yeah.
So for you, what is the hallmarks of good exploration? Because like for me, I will probably never run a seafaring campaign because I would find months at sea to be a horrifying thing to tackle as a DM.
Yeah.
I would just rather do anything else. And because a lot of the times, like the thing that scares me about traveling and all that kind of stuff is that you have a limited amount of characters that they can interact with when it comes to like seafaring stuff. Like you can have people show up that are external, but usually you're kind of whatever crew is manning the boat or something. You're gonna know them, and that's pretty much it until you find another island or whatever. So how would you try to tackle something where somebody, especially with like Spelljammer coming out or nautical themed campaigns, how would you go about trying to create an interesting campaign that is compelling, but is also mostly about exploration and travel?
Well, you want to bookend the travel stuff, like where are they starting, where they're going.
Yeah.
How long is that going to take?
Yep.
And once you have that figured out, you can kind of skip the parts where it's just Lord of the Ring walking.
And then they walked for 10 hours.
They walk. This is the farthest I've ever walked from the Shire before, and continue walking.
Right.
And you just kind of figure like what events are going to happen, like what kind of like set pieces do you want to give them a chance to explore. And throw like some non-lethal challenges. Weather is a good inclement if you're on the sea or traveling overland. What kind of storms might be happening. Or if you want to like allude to something, what kind of weird weather's going on that might make them think
like ghost ships.
there's some big magic happening because this lightning is green and that's not supposed to be happening.
Yeah, right.
Or to bring Fallout again, one of their on their like back end, guess whatever their time thing they use. It's sunny, it's rainy, and occasionally there's a radiation storm, which will poison your character if you're out in it. That could be a fun little like bit of flavor. Like maybe there's some sort of chaotic magic in your world and these storms come up that do really weird things. If you're into weird pulp fiction from the 80s, there was this book called I Left My Sneakers in Dimension X.
Yeah.
And when the party was in Dimension X, every once in a while there'd be a reality quake.
Yeah.
And everything would just transfigure into different variations of itself. And if you went back to normal at the end of it, or you became a monster, like very rarely, 1% chance you were just this gross like being. And wouldn't that be fun in a D&D game? All right,
you roll a D100, and if you hit a 1, then you turn into a monster.
Yeah, roll a D100. if you roll a 1, all right, whatever changes happen are permanent, at least until the next reality quake.
Yeah.
And that's like another good way to like just flavor your world. Like what kind of weather does it have? What stands out?
For me, I also think that it would be very beneficial to think about, and I always think that this is beneficial, to think about, okay, what do my characters seem to want to explore? What do I as a storyteller want to explore? And then, like you said, you can have moments of 3 days pass at sea and not a single gust of wind has blown, and everyone on the ship is starting to get scared because if this keeps up, you're going to run out of food. And you see the captain starts taking meetings with the first mate in his cabin, and people are starting to get a little nervous about what they are talking about. What are you guys going to do? And then like you zoom in on that moment too. And you can like have those kind of things amongst like the actual putting the foot in front of the other doesn't have to be the thing on travel. It can be what is happening during these stretches that are...
Yeah, you don't want to make the exploration parts of your game tedious.
Yeah. And that's the hardest thing to do. I feel like I've played in also some games where exploration's like, okay, I guess we walk that way then. And then the DM's like, well, that's going to be that's going to take a while. And then you're like, okay, then it takes a while. And it's like, oh, but then that thing might happen. It's like, okay, then we don't do it. What do you want us to do?
Yeah, and that's like, okay, every day of travel, just roll a D20.
Yeah.
If it's like, just still from like the source books, is like, usually it's like if it's an 18 to 20, an encounter happens that day.
Yeah.
Not only encounters or anything. Like, I think some of them could just be a pack of wolves in the distance, but they go a different direction, and, you just remind you that you're out here in nature.
Yeah.
Not every encounter needs to be like, okay, we're going to stop the game, everyone's going to make checks. It's risky. No, the exploration is supposed to be the laid-back portion where you're not really risking too much, but you're learning about the world. Yeah. And I think trying to turn that into anything else is where a lot of people lose the exploration aspect of the games.
Yeah. I also, for me, I think that and I know this is heresy, I hate resource management. I don't like to do it. Whenever we play our games, I completely, even though I'm like a rogue that steals stuff and is supposed to be someone who likes to collect things, I totally am just like, someone else keep track of all this shit.
And then no one does.
Yeah, that kind of stuff. So I think that for me also, I kind of like the idea, for me, again, this is a very specific type of player, because I also know people who love that management of like, okay, we have this much money, we have this much food, how are we going to get there with this? But for me, I always think, get rid of the tracking for me, and instead be like, you've eaten your last ration. How are you going to go about, like, that there's like 3 more days. You could probably get there. Without any more food, but it's not going to be good when you get there. You're going to be hungry. You're going to be like upset and not ready to face whatever it is you're trying to get to. And so then it's like, okay, you're in this heavily wooded area. How do you want to do this? I think that's a chance also to let the players kind of stretch their imagination and their ingenuity. Same with like on a ship, with your weather example, you could just have an encounter that's just a normal storm, and it's like, okay, you hear the creaking of the mast, it's about to break, you think, with the amount of wind that's coming. How are you guys going to try to get through this storm? Like, that's also kind of interesting and that's, like you said, non-combat. It's not like dangerous. Well, it can be, but it's not. There's stakes, but not life and death.
Role play in this role playing game. Just talk it out.
Yeah.
Figure it out.
I guess that's it. I guess that's what I was saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, just talk it out. But I think that, that the fun in this sort of moment is actually trying to engage the player's problem-solving skills.
Yeah.
Not their
dice rolling combat mechanics.
Sure.
Because that gets its spotlight kind of regardless.
Yeah. And you can also, I mean, this is my personal opinion on dice rolling, because I know you're very big at this table. We abide by dice, and I appreciate that. But also, like in this sort of example, I think that dice should be not an impediment to ingenuity, but just like, how hard is this going to be for you? Like if you're out looking for deer and you have like a bow and arrow, it's like, okay, roll a survival check. You roll a 4, and it's just like, okay, you know there are deer here, but you're not finding any. How are you going to try to feed yourself? You know what I mean?
Right.
And instead of like, you go back to the cart empty-handed, you fucking suck, you nerd.
Yeah, it should always be failing forward.
Yeah.
In any sort of, no matter what
something.
you're doing. Like, okay, you're hunting and you fail your hunting trip. Okay, you just come back with berries and some roots.
Yeah.
No one's going to be full tonight, but yeah. Unless you're playing a game that's like survival based.
Yeah.
Keeping track of exhaustion and hunger levels. You know, yeah. Just say they got something, not what they were after.
Or you could even do like, you're looking for deer, you follow these tracks, and like they roll really bad on their survival. You find a deer, and then you're like, oh yeah, and you pull the bowstring back, and you hear a growl, and you turn, and there's a grizzly bear that is like on top of you.
Oh, that's also a good way to fail a hunting check.
Yeah.
Okay, you've got your deer,
Yeah.
but you've attracted
Something
a predator.
else you have to deal with.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
there, you did it.
Yay!
Succeeded twice. You found 2 animals.
Exactly, and it's like, okay, are you gonna do this trip, or are you gonna face this lethal encounter?
Do
on
you
your
leave
own?
it behind
Yeah.
and tear out of there, or do you try to fight this bear?
Yeah, I think that that's also an interesting way of doing things, where it's not that they are unsuccessful, but it's just it gets really hard. You have to,
like,
things are harder now.
Adding a complication instead of saying it's a failure is a great way to play when you're out in the wilds and exploring. Like, or again, like we talked about weather before, like, okay, you're out hunting, but now it started to rain and you didn't bring your cloak.
Right.
So you found food, but if you don't make it back with a con save, something like low, like, I mean, around the 10s, then okay, you got a point of exhaustion from being out in the rain for too long.
Yeah.
And that's not something that's going to be with them too terribly long.
Yeah.
You get rid of that with a long
like
rest.
a point of exhaustion is not a game ender. It's just like, oh, this sucks.
Exactly. It's just like you failed.
Yeah.
But here it is anyway, and here's this other little thing that now you have to deal with.
Yeah. I also think that I don't know what you feel about this, so I'd love to pick your brain, but survival checks, as well as like arcana, history, all that kind of stuff, I find it very hard sometimes to fail them in an interesting way. Like that bear example is interesting, and I think that I'll probably use that someday. Yeah. But especially when it's like magic on a door and you roll arcana, you get a 0, let's say. And it's just like, you don't know what it is. Then it's just like, fuck, man, that sucks. Like, I like, how do you fail these things, especially if they're out in the wilderness and like maybe they're on a ship and they see a tentacle come out of the water and then splash back down, and they're like, I roll a nature check to see what the fuck that was, and they're like, it's a 1, and you're like, I don't know. How do you make it like we were talking about, how do you fail those checks forward instead of throwing up you don't know about that, and that's all I can tell you.
A lot of those checks, though, is just like recalling information. If you don't have it, you don't have it.
Yeah.
But, I mean, with some of those things, okay, if you're like a magic locks on a door and you make an arcana check.
Yeah.
Or if you fail the arcana check, maybe it's just a penalty of like, okay, you solve it, but it takes you 2 hours of work. So, I mean, do you sacrifice 2 hours of being in one spot in this dungeon to do this? Or do you think you would give up before? You know, give them the choice. I mean, if you see a weird creature out in the woods and you don't know what it is, I mean, there's really no way to fail forward on that unless you want to like knock them off the ship and be like, okay, now you have a closer look.
Now you're really close to it. You see it's a giant squid.
Now you've got some information you can play with.
Yeah,
you're in the water with it now, but okay, I can give you some more details about what you're facing.
As its giant beak
now that
tears your arm off.
Now that you're in more danger.
Yeah, I think that might be right. I'm also thinking like for the Arcana check, it would require, flexibility of what is happening. Like if it's just like a lock on a door, maybe you roll a bad Arcana check and you're like, yeah, because this world is a magical one, that this is a magical lock. And from being a kid and like the locks that your mom would put on a cabinet to keep you out from the sweets, that's going to zap you if you try to open it without the right word. Doesn't mean that it's not going to open, but you're going to get a real good zap. Something like that, I guess.
I guess another thing you can do is, because, D&D specifically and other TRPGs, I would imagine, are just about... Edit this part out. Because I'm forgetting the word that I want.
No chance. I am going to keep this in. Daniel is just clutching the bridge of his nose, trying to will the word into his mind.
I know it starts with an A.
What is it? What are you trying to say?
So like in D&D,
yes,
you have a certain amount of resources, spell slots, hit points.
Yep.
And it's all about keeping those for as long as possible.
Yeah.
While the DM tries to take them away from you until you have nothing left. God, I'm gonna hate that I can't think of that word for the rest of my life. 'Cause as soon as this is over, I'm gonna remember what I was after. So you have an arcane check.
Yeah.
All right, you fail it. But are you willing to give up one of your highest level spell slots to pass?
Yeah.
Like, do you spend your magic to break through what this magic is?
Yeah, it's like there's a way to efficiently undo this lock.
Yeah,
or
you failed by passing with this check. You don't get it for free.
Yeah.
What are you willing to give up
like you could
progress?
Yeah, you could be like, it would take a 5th level spell slot to essentially just force your mana into it and explode the lock or something, Yeah, that's an interesting way of doing it too.
There's always, the old, you failed an Arcana check. You can still figure out what it is, but because you're forcing like this information, channeling this information that you don't have access to, 2d10 psychic damage.
Yeah.
You'll succeed anyway.
Yeah, it's interesting because when it comes to like traversing maps and things, I think that, controversially, you hate this game. Did not like it when you played it. Elden Ring is a fucking badass travel game. Essentially, it's just walking around, finding weird shit, and being like, I want to look into that. And then eventually it leads to some crazy boss fight that you have or whatever, or some sword at the end. You're like, wow, that was cool. And I think that they do it really well because they make everything interesting and nothing... Like, everything is interesting, but at any time you can turn around and be like, fuck that shit, and just walk away. And you don't feel like, man, I've lost out on the cool story. You instead have been like, putting a pin in that area. I'm going to come back there when I have gained 10 levels and can fight this giant fucking bird with knives on its feet or whatever.
That's classic sandboxing.
Yeah.
It's like, okay. I think Fallout does this too. Like, I'm gonna bring up Fallout New Vegas.
Yeah.
You start in a town, and there are like a couple of roads leading out of it. I'm sorry for the internet. It's been a while since I played this. But if you go north, like shit will kill you real fast.
Yeah.
But if you go south, things are a bit more manageable, and that's how you use the map to like sort of guide, railroad without railroading.
Yeah.
You can go any direction you want, but you'll survive this direction a lot more easy than if you go that direction.
Yeah. I also think that it's important for DMs and GMs to know that since you know what the map is like, don't keep secrets from the players. Because like in Fallout New Vegas, which is a great example, because they do a crazy amount of design on that map to be like, you can get to Vegas going through that fucking mountain range, but you are going to fight a bug that can rip you apart every single moment. Like you're literally just running away from monster to monster, and you have no weapons. It sucks. And like you said, going south, you basically are traversing the entire map the way it's intended, and finding quests along the way as you slowly level up to get to Vegas. But the game also doesn't hide that from you. Like the people in the town are like, don't go north. Fuck, it sucks. There are huge monsters out there. I think like I saw some people down south that might be able to help you out find a safe passage to Vegas. Like build into your maps signposts and people that are willing to give them information to be like, hey, travelers, it looks like you're not from around here, but there's a cave out back that I just think you should stay away from. The whole village calls it the Howling Cave because weird howling comes out of there, and every month we leave a cow out there because if we don't, monsters come and just rip apart our town. So just stay away from the cave. And then the players are like, huh, Howling Cave.
And they all make a beeline straight for
yeah,
it.
they're like, I'm going to fucking solve this cave puzzle.
Someone mentioned this by name. We should go there.
This is a named place. This is probably a treasure there.
This is where we're supposed to do. But yeah, no, like you can always put signposts down and just give the information to like your ranger or your druid or barbarians, people who would have been out and about in the wilds. They know where it's safe to go to or not safe to go to. Yeah. And you know, so you got to play that game with your party too. It's like, okay, I know it's your world. You're presenting it to your players, but also they've lived there. Yeah. So don't hide everything behind the whole. Oh, you have to make a check to know this. Some things they're gonna. They know that there are monsters in the woods. Like it's the first thing you would tell a child if you lived in a village by the woods. Hey, don't fucking go out that way. You'll die.
Howling Cave. Don't go there.
Howling Caves. It kills the children. Yeah. I was just reading a comic. God, I can't remember the name of it. But one of the things, they were like in this like dwarven mines, and they were asking the dwarves, if the monsters are above you and they want to kill you, why don't you just take your armies and wipe them out? And one of the dwarves looks back and goes, nothing's better than having upstairs neighbors that want to kill you to teach the children constant vigilance and the importance of heavy armor. It was like, yeah, we know.
Like we know what's up. We've have this problem on lock, and in fact, it serves a purpose.
Yeah, we've acclimated to this problem, and that's how we sort of continue our society. Yeah. So it could be a thing like that, or if you ever played The Witcher, you explore a village where there's a monster in the woods that everyone kind of like worships. Yeah. To keep it peaceful. Yeah. And it's like, oh, okay, the people of the world have figured out how to survive the world. Yeah. So look to them for clues. Let them tell people about things that they know about. Not every monster is going to be unknowable, unseen. Yeah. A lot of them are probably just like, yeah, we know how to avoid that. And you can too. Here's how.
They just give you a like Monsters for Dummies books.
Yeah. Like, don't go to the water line after sunset.
And you're like, why? It's like, just don't do it.
Yeah, you'll get dragged under. We have merfolk, you know? Or, don't go to the top of the hills in the forest. Oh, why not? Griffins. Yeah. It's like...
My grandfather was fucking eaten by griffins. Just don't go there. Like, I hate them. I hate griffins.
The people are going to know where monsters are. Yeah. And they're going to know how to avoid them or deal with them. I mean...
And probably there's always going to be like a little money to be made. You know what I mean? There's going to be something that drives the brave, the few to try to encroach upon the wilds.
Because even think about real life, 1800s. We knew what to do if we saw a bear.
Yeah, run.
And if it's brown, lay down. If it's black, attack. Yeah. That's been around for ages. A bear could be a monster. And furs... And other like wild frontiersmen got paid bounties if a bear was getting too close to go out, kill it, and bring it back. Yeah. And that was just the bear. Imagine if your world has basilisks in it, like
wyverns.
It would be the same thing. People are going to have survival tips, and if they're a big enough problem, the infantry are going to get paid to go out and deal with that. And that could be like a little exploration side mission. That's not going to be too challenging for them, but it lets them interact with the world a bit more. Yeah,
totally. Or if, like, in the case of Spelljammer, you could just have, going from reality to reality or universe jumping, you could have the things in between be sort of known by some folks on Sigil, but then you pop into a reality and you're like, I have no idea what's in here. Yeah. Like I haven't read the book on like, Dwarfland 782. No dwarves, surprisingly.
No dwarves in Dwarfland. Oh, like...
Not this one.
Like green in Greenland. It's just, it's not there.
Exactly. But another thing I would say is like if you are playing a low information campaign where it's sort of like a Lewis and Clark kind of thing where you're going out, you're paid by a king to go out into the wilds and map it, then what I would do in those cases is it is the expectation of all the players that they will not know what things are.
Right.
Because it's new. It's all new. But I would say establish with all of the characters beforehand, why are they going on that mission? Are they just the muscle? Because maybe they're not going to be very useful in that sort of like cartography or zoological kind of exploration. But maybe you have a ranger who the reason why he's on the trip is because the king's like, you are the best, best known hunter in the land. And you kind of know what's up with animals. So as you experience new ones as a DM, you can be like, this looks like a lot like a basilisk that you've seen at home. Doesn't look the same though, but you have some inferences about how to deal with this. You know, like you can give them information based on what they want to as players be good at. And with the expectation that you're not going to be good at everything. Like that guy probably is going to be the go-to for figuring out new unexplored threats. But maybe the person who's just like really like the cartographer gnome that's like a mage, maybe he's the one who actually is able to get you through like a big river that you need to, you solve my river puzzle.
I'm kind of like just off on a tangent, but talking about like going out to the wild and just being like exploring it. Have you ever heard the old theory, and I guess this was more true for like D&D 2nd edition Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, is that like every D&D world exists after some big apocalyptic event?
No, I have never heard of that.
Because one of like the things that you had to do in an Advanced Dungeons & Dragons 2nd edition was like you build strongholds, and your gold went into building castles and villages, and the whole point was there used to be things like there's ruins and dungeons all over the map, but there's not a lot of safe places to be.
Right.
So like maybe dragons have like torn down civilization, and they've sort of, thousands of years later they've died off or gotten like less populous.
Or you just haven't seen them in a while.
You haven't seen them. They're hibernating. They're somewhere else. Yeah. But your party could be like, okay, so we have to go back out and find, like, we have to make new settlements. We have to find resources. The towns are like, are going to die out if we don't get new blood in here.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting way to do it too. It's sort of in 4th edition, the points of light sort of idea of like the world is dark and there are small spatterings of civilization that are constantly trying to beat back kind of the savage wilds, and then you kind of as an adventurer are one of the people who go out into them. Like I think that's like a super fun idea. Again, I think it could be a really good campaign in other, because D&D is crunchy. Like it's not as crunchy as other things. But it does build in a lot of resource management, how to do things. And in the source books, there's a lot of how you can spend your gold and how you can manage a castle and all that kind of stuff. When it comes to other TTRPGs, I would say, especially like Apocalypse World and things like that, just be aware of what your system was created to do. Like Apocalypse Worlds, Powered by the Apocalypse is based on creative communal storytelling. So it's going to center that over resource management. But things like Apocalypse World and other ones do have ways, like characters that their moves are, hey, you're the leader of a base and you're trying to build it out, and you actually don't go and fight. You're just trying to be the admin person of how to keep this facility functioning after the apocalypse. You know what I mean? So there are ways to do it there as well. I just would remind everyone in kind of a very basic way, just know what your system is supposed to do so that you're not fighting it. You know what I mean?
You're right, yeah. Again, that's why session zeros again are so important. What kind of game are we playing?
Yeah, what kind of game are we playing? Why are we playing it as people? Like, I think another thing to kind of suss out from your players is, do they want to be told a story? Like, are we making a story together? Do they want that roller coaster? Or are they like, I'm like itching for exploration and adventure, because then you're like, hey, have I got a thing for you? This map, completely unexplored. Go for it.
I realize that, that could change as the campaign goes on.
Totally, yeah.
Players may want to take a break from maybe like a social heavy game. Like, okay, we've done the politics for like 2 months now. We want to just, can we please go camping?
Yeah, it could be. It could be just like you're in a politics heavy game, and then the king that you've like helped reinstate or gather power around or whatever it is, or depose, and then the leaders of the new area is like, hey, we don't have any wood anymore. Can you go find this special type of wood or stone or magic item that is rumored to be in this area? We really need it. And then, like you said, time to go camping, everyone.
Right, yeah. Get out of town for a bit.
Yeah.
Because, I'm going to say all TTRPGs, but a lot of them are built around social interaction, combat, and then this exploration.
Yeah.
And there's a way to do, like, you might not get all 3 in every session, but you can, if you rotate through them and, like, put at least 2 of them into each time you meet up, then I think you have, like, a very good, varied campaign that'll keep people interested.
Yeah, so in a couple episodes ago, I was talking to my friend Michael about a specific system called Fellowship, where literally you're just walking around trying to gain allies to fight like the big bad. And the big bad is the DM. So the DM is also trying to build a rogues gallery, and it's sort of like a contest to see who can build the biggest fellowship to eventually overcome the other. And I think that game is fucking bonkers wild for exploration because it requires you to go out into the world and have a little bit of that. And then they walked until you find some weird stone man to be like, hey, what's going on? Like all the river's dried up and now my joints ache, and you like help the stone man. And then it becomes, a guardian of the river or something to help you against the big bad. Like there's a lot of fun ways that a lot of systems are set up. So if you are looking for a kind of exploration heavy campaign and you don't want it to be crunchy, there are systems out there that can do that. It's fun.
I'm going to go backwards a little bit.
I'm going to go back in time.
I'm going to go back in time, and I'm just going to let you know, if you keep this in there, that attrition was the word.
Attrition. Oh,
so
what a good word.
Take this moment.
Multisyllabic?
Edit this out. Put that one word back in.
Are you kidding? I'm not going to edit out your victory of finally remembering the word you wanted.
No, I have the victory, and it's fine.
You're like, I know it in my heart that I figured it out, that I had it.
My victory will be you putting me saying the right word into that segment.
Absolutely not.
And then just skipping the rest of it.
Listen, basically what I've figured out is that every episode needs a bit of a story arc, and we just found one. Your loss of the word, your desire to find it, and in this moment, I started speaking my place of comfort. Yeah.
Then I needed a word.
Classic story circle, man. Classic story circle.
I went looking for it.
Yeah. And eventually now we're back here, but you're a changed person.
Yeah, I'm changed, having remembered the word and being more confident.
Exactly.
Yeah. We did it.
Well,
we proved an earlier episode.
Yeah. I mean, story circle's great. Huge fan. But as for exploration, is there anything else that we should hit on before we close out this episode?
Just remember, the players in the DM need to figure out if it's something they want to really focus on, and keep it moving. You don't want to be stuck running.
Tempo.
Yeah. Oh, you did 6 hours in traveling. Now we're done. Now you're going 6 more hours. Now everyone do rest. Perception. That's not fun, I don't think, for anyone. It might be for your group, but I think if you just pick when the encounters are going to happen, what day, and then play those encounters, just let them happen naturally, you can have a lot of fun. Yeah,
I think that for me, the note I kind of want to stress is that exploration is, it's like itching the part of us that just wants to overcome the unknown, to like go out and rough it and overcome obstacles, and in the end feel like I'm a genius, I did it. I've encountered and defeated the nature around me, and so like you said, talk to your players about what interests them about exploration, and make sure that you're giving it to them, because tabletop is all about having fun. So if you're just like making everyone be like, fuck, I hate camping.
Defeating the big bad evil guy is one kind of power fantasy.
Yeah.
And figuring out how to catch a fish
Yeah.
is another that's just as satisfying.
Yeah, inventing the fish taco in your small camp. That could be a huge thing. That could be huge.
Yeah. Big moments.
Well, thank you, Daniel, for coming on again.
Hey, thanks for having me.
And I'm sure we'll have you again. Anything you want to go out on?
On top.
Okay, see ya. Thanks, everyone, for listening to another episode of Tabletopped. If you're interested in talking with us, please send us an email at tabletoppedpodcast@gmail.com. Or you could follow us on Twitter @Tabletopped. Our DMs are open. If you like the show, please do the things that podcasts tell you to do. Subscribe, rate, share with friends. And if you don't like the show, may I suggest sharing with enemies? I mean, that would show them, right? Thanks again to everyone who follows the show, and we will see you next week for more episodes of Tabletopped.